Back to Word Time. This is Coach Shaw with Coach for Christ. Coming to you with a message today that I originally titled, and I don't know if I'm going to keep this title, but I started with this concept called rapture or reaping. Um, this has to do with the rapture or the lack thereof. Okay, and kind of hinted at this off and on. And I know people who know Coach Shelby or myself, and when we talk about this kind of stuff, we do not believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. Okay, and I'm going to go through a passage here that I feel encapsulates why the rapture is not a pre-tribulation rapture, and actually that the rapture is not the rapture that everyone thinks it is, as it's portrayed in movies and stories and things like that. First and foremost, you need to do a little research. There's real quick Google searches, real quick YouTube searches. You can find the rapture that as it's known today, as we would maybe say the left behind rapture that's been popularized. It has only been around for 200 years, the last 200 years, about 1830s or so. It came from a guy, I believe his last name was Darby. And if you actually researched where the rapture, the pre-tribulation rapture, as it's portrayed, came came from a dream of like a Scottish woman, and that they just spun this into this is what this means, and it gained steam. And I'll tell you why the reason it gained steam is because it is a feel-good thing. It is not something that was taught throughout church history. And in the 1830s, this guy brought it over from England and came to America with it. And I mean, there's not a whole lot of people on here, I guess, that listen to, we don't get a whole lot of views on these long videos, but we talk about Americanized theology all the time. And there's nothing more Americanized in theology than that feel good message of you'll get out of here before it gets real bad, because the Bible does not preach that in any way, shape, or form. You have to pick and choose. Coach Shelby says this all the time. You have to handpick verses from here, verses from there in order to get to what you want to believe. Okay. Just like the once saved, always saved theology of the feel good, I don't have to do anything, I'm good to go. This is the same thing, the rapture. The rapture ties into that. To me, the pre-trib rapture and the once saved, always saved theology ties together, okay, in a wrongful way that will lead to the great apostasy, okay? Because if I believe, one, I'm once saved, always saved, I can't lose it, and two, that I'm going to get out of here before things get bad, what happens when things start getting bad and I hadn't been taken away? Okay. Is it possible I might start to wonder if what I believed in all along or what I was told my whole life is true? Because I feel like that would be a great and easy way for the beast and the beast system to have a great apostasy during that time frame, than for than to have lots of people that believed a certain way and then all of a sudden, oh well, I guess what I always believed wasn't true. I guess God's not real. Whereas there's people like me, the outliers, Coach Shelby, think people like that are talking about this other way. Prepare, persevere. This is hard. This is, and here's the deal. I hope to God that I'm wrong. But the concept that people don't understand, if I'm wrong, then that means I'm getting out of here and I'm in heaven and everything's hunky dory and fine. But if you're wrong, if you believe in a pre-trib rapture and you're wrong, you're setting yourself up for great disappointment, failure, persecution, things that you're not expecting to have to deal with. Okay. Well, you got to believe, Coach Shaw, you got to this, that. Well, I do believe, and I hope to God that I'm wrong, but that's not what the Bible, to me, the way I read it, teaches. And I think this passage, I'll kind of go into that. Not only is the pre-trib rapture not a thing, the rapture in itself of what you believe it means, like there's certain verses, and I'm going to get into that here in a second, but it's the rapture itself is not what you think it means anyway. Okay. The passage today will be in Luke 17, and I'm going to try to get through verses 26 through 37, obviously as fast as I can. I always kind of drag on. I'm not as fast as Coach Shelby. But the question I'll start with is, when the people who out there who believe in a pre-trib rapture, they always have a handful of verses they go to, right? Or something that they'll tell you why they believe that. And I'm going to read you one of the ones that they always point out to me as what must be proof of the rapture. Okay. And it's in Luke 17. We'll get to it a little later, but start out. This is verse 34 through 36. I tell you, on that night, there will be two in one bed. One will be taken and the other will be left. There will be two women grinding at the same place. One will be taken and the other left. Two men will be in the field. One will be taken and the other left. So this is where the word rapture comes from. Okay. It's not used in the Greek in this particular passage, but when people hear this, obviously one's taken, one's left. Okay, that's where the connotation of the rapture comes from. And that's what pre-tribbers, well, I'll say, pre-tribbers will tell me a lot of times is, well, that's proof that the rapture is real. Well, that's proof that there is a rapture, but it doesn't show when the rapture is. Okay, that's number one. And it sure doesn't tell you which one's taken and which one's left. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit later, if you'll just pay attention and be patient, that it's not the righteous one being taken here. Okay, I know, bold statement, right? We'll get to that. So let's start over. Let's start at the beginning. Luke 17, verse 26. That's where we'll start. And just as it happened in the days of Noah, so it will also be in the days of the Son of Man. Now, there's one word that a lot of pre-tribbers will always talk about is this imminence. Okay. Many Christians take this particular passage and talk about the imminence of Christ. Imminence meaning Christ is going to return. He could return at any time. Okay. Now, I don't personally, could Christ return at any time? Yes, of course he could. He can do whatever he wants. He's God. But there is passages that would counteract the fact that he could return at any time. And First Thessalonians, I believe it might be Second Thessalonians. I don't have it pulled up right here. I'll pull it up on the screen. But it talks about a few things that have to happen. Okay, the beast has to be revealed, the temple has to be rebuilt, and the great apostasy has to happen. Okay, so while we can sit here and say God is all powerful and he can do whatever he wants, of course, but what he writes in his word is also something that has to be true, and he won't go against his own word, right? So when it talks about things that must happen before these days come, and I'll put it up on the screen, okay? It's in Second Thessalonians 2, I'm sorry, and it's verse 3. Don't be fooled by what they say, for that day, the day that, the final day that we're talking about, the day of the Lord. Don't be fooled by what they say, for that day will not come until there is a great rebellion against God, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, one who brings destruction. He will exalt himself and defy everything that people call God and every object of worship. He will even sit in the temple of God, claiming that he himself is God. Okay, so like I said, in verse 3, it starts here, that day will not come until, all right, and it says, number one, great rebellion against God. That's the great apostasy I'm talking about. Okay, and again, how better a way to have a great apostasy, people leaving the faith in mass, than to see events unfolding that they thought they would not be here for. Okay, because the man of lawlessness being revealed a lot of times is during that mid-tribulation period. Okay, great apostasy would have to happen. The man of lawlessness is revealed. That's number two. And then the third is he exalts himself in the temple. Okay, now that could be, a lot of people take that as the temple, where the temple will be rebuilt in Jerusalem, but it could be talking about another temple connotation there. But there's at least those two: the man of lawlessness being revealed and a great apostasy. Okay, so when we talk about imminence of Christ, all right, as in the days of Noah, it could happen any time. Well, here's the deal: back in Luke 17:26, just as it happened in the days of Noah, these people, the people pre-tribbers that bring about imminence, well, even in the days of Noah, it wasn't something that could happen at any time. All right, there was a plan, and people saw it. It talks about in Hebrews about how Noah preached. And I'm just assuming we paraphrase and do all that, but he is building the ark, and then he's preaching at nighttime, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. But people knew something was coming; they were just ignoring it. Okay, and just as it happened in the days of Noah, it'll also be in the days of the Son of Man. These people know something's coming; they're just ignoring it. Have you ever ministered to somebody, witnessed to them, and they just ignored, don't care? They know something's coming; they know something's up. They just don't care. They're ignoring it. They're going on about their normal business because the kingdom is not important to them. Okay, this is the connotation for that. So when we sit here and act like it, there's an imminence that it could happen at any time. Possible, yes. But again, the word of God, Second Thessalonians 2 and 3, there's some things that have to take place first. Now, I'm not saying that we can sit here and, hey, just take it easy until the temple's rebuilt. No, I'm not saying that. That's not how we should live. And if you're a Christian, you don't do that. Okay. But just as it happened in the days of Noah, it'll be in the days of the Son of Man. This passage is talking about the people's preoccupation with the mundane matters of everyday life that is shown in the following verse. Okay. Things that they're doing normal. And I'm going to get into why that matters in just a second. Okay. Um, but just as in the days of Noah, there was an irreverence for the calling of the gospel. Like I mentioned, if you ever witness to someone and they just don't care. Okay. And in 2 Peter 2:5, it says, but preserve Noah, a preacher of righteousness. He was a preacher. He did this stuff. There was at some point where he's preaching to the people that are about to get swept away in the flood, that are about to get taken. Precursor, right? Genesis 19:14, Lot rushed to tell his daughter's fiance, but they thought he was joking. Okay, same thing. We're witnessing to people. They don't think that we're being serious. They don't want to believe it because they don't want to follow the God's precepts. They don't want to be obedient, right? But just like with Lot in Genesis 19:14, they thought he was joking. Oh, that's not that we're not about to get destroyed. That's not really about to happen. You're just messing with us. Yeah, I'm not really going to go to hell. I'll have time. I can't tell you how many people have told me they'll have time once the rapture hits, they'll have 7 years to get things right. That's what they're waiting on. I'm sure that these people are waiting to become Christians at that time. Like, give me a break. Okay, in the next verse, I told you part of that precursor from the first one. The people's preoccupation with the mundane matters of everyday life is shown in the next verse. So, verse 27, they were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Okay. So Jesus could have spoken clearly about the extreme wickedness of the day, but he didn't. What did he talk about here? They were eating, drinking, marrying, being given in marriage. Are those things bad? Are those things inherently bad? Okay. Until the day Noah entered the ark. Okay. So setting the stage, people are living life, eating, drinking, marrying, being given in marriage. Those are pretty normal things, right? Not inherently sinful things, right? Now, you can say what they're eating, what they're drinking, but the Bible doesn't tell us that. It just says they're eating and drinking and marrying. Okay, that's not inherently bad. So why point that out and say until the day Noah entered the ark and then the flood came and destroyed them all? Why are we talking? Why does Jesus say they were doing normal things up until the day before the ark was closed and the flood came and got them? All right. Instead of Jesus pointing out, and again, I'd say Jesus, this is red letters in the Bible. Why is he not pointing out that all the bad things they were doing? And then so this verse could say they were killing, they were raping, they were idolatering until the day Noah entered the ark. Okay, it didn't say that. It said they were doing like normal everyday things. Okay, so he pointed that out. None of these things, again, are sinful in and of themselves, but this is Jesus explaining that people will be consumed with themselves and what is going on in their life that they don't have time for the gospel. Again, going back, witnessing to them. Noah's preaching to these people. They don't have time for it because they have other things on their mind. Okay? So, again, set the stage here. If these people are going through everyday life, normal life, that means it is not, it is just like it is nowadays, okay, where there's not a great imminent threat. People are not worried about getting swept away right now. They're living life normally, okay, just like it was back then. Destruction was about to hit them, all right, but were they being warned? Yeah. Okay. So you sit here and pre-tribbers will say, well, it's imminent. It could happen at any time. No, it was about to happen. And if they were paying attention, they would know it was about to happen. But they weren't. Just like now, people aren't paying attention. The kingdom is at hand, right? Jesus is going to return at some point. We don't know the exact day. There's things that we know, 2 Thessalonians 2, that have to happen beforehand. But as Christians, we live according to his word, and we should live in a warned state because we're looking forward to something. These people were just living normal life, not concerned with things that they didn't have time for. And that's when you witness to somebody now, they don't have time for the gospel. They don't have time to stop, change their life, repent, and start living for Christ. Okay, they want to do what they want to do, and that's a human thing. All right. Verse 28. It was the same as happened in the days of Lot. They were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planting, they were building. Okay, so again, just as in Noah's day, they were doing all these normal things. Again, nothing written here inherently sinful. Okay, pointing out that these are not wicked things necessarily, but everyday things that can take your mind off of what you're supposed to be focused on. Again, compared to nowadays, how things are now, not people don't have to do something inherently sinful to take their time away from God. It becomes idolatry, right? It doesn't seem a sinful act. What does it say? Eating, drinking, buying, selling. We do that every day. Planting, building. We do that every day. Is that inherently sinful? No, but it is if it's taking you off looking to Christ, right? Okay, again, 2 Peter 2:5, it's commonly assumed Noah was preaching to the lost while working on the ark. All right, here we have Lot's proof, proof of Lot preaching also. Genesis 19:14. Now we can talk about Lot, and that's a whole other subject, but he did rush to tell his daughter's fiancés. He knew that doom was coming, and he went to warn people that he cared about, if nothing else, people that were related to him by marriage, right? Okay. So there's proof that things are being told. It is not, again, it is not oh, we're just surprised by this all of a sudden. No, people are being warned about it, just like they're being warned now. Okay. No doubt people in both examples knew of the coming doom. They just either didn't care or didn't believe it. Okay. And again, Lot's daughter's fiancés thought he was just kidding. Both signs of what? Unbelievers, people that aren't focused on Christ. Okay. So we have examples of Christians and we have examples of unbelievers. Again, you can compare this time, the days of Noah, the days of Lot, the same way you can compare it to nowadays. All right. Okay, so I'm going to flip to 1 Thessalonians 5 and just talk about some of this stuff and how it compares to now. So in verse 1, now concerning how and when all this will happen, dear brothers and sisters, we don't really need to write you. For you know quite well that the day of the Lord's return will come unexpectedly, like a thief in the night, when people are saying everything is peaceful and secure, then disaster will fall on them as suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pains begin, and there will be no escape. So verses 1 through 3 in this passage right here talk about how, and I'm going to point this out, okay, for you know quite well the day of the Lord in verse 2 will come unexpectedly. Well, that sounds pretty imminent, Coach Shaw. Like, why are you trying to denounce imminence here? Okay, for who? Who is the thief in the night for? Those who have read Revelation, the thief in the night is for someone who hasn't prepared his home, who isn't protecting his home. Okay, when people are saying everything's peaceful and secure, just like these people that are eating, drinking, buying, selling, just as it was in Lot's day, just as it was in Noah's day, okay, then disaster will fall on them as suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pains begin. It is a shock to them. Why? Because they're not paying attention to what's going on. They're not listening to the preaching. They're ignoring the signs, okay? But verse 4, but you aren't in the dark about these things, dear brothers and sisters, and you won't be surprised when the day of the Lord comes like a thief, okay? So it's coming like a thief. We know that in the night. We know that, and you can connotate that all the way to Revelation and back. But it says you aren't in the dark, dear brothers and sisters, and you won't be surprised. Okay, for you are all children of the light and of the day. We don't belong to darkness and night. So be on your guard, not asleep like the others. Stay alert and be clear headed. Night is the time when people sleep and drinkers get drunk. But let us who live in the light be clear headed, protected by the armor of faith and love, and wearing as our helmet the confidence of our salvation. Okay? It's imminent to people who aren't believers. They don't know it's coming, even though they've been warned of it. Those of us who have an idea, who have discernment as a Christian, who I believe have the Holy Spirit in their lives, these things are coming about. And you as a Christian nowadays, you can sense it, right? It's coming. Jesus' return is coming at some point here. All right. But again, we know that there's certain things that have to happen first. And true believers, and I mean, I know this is going to sound like it sounds, but true believers aren't sitting here with it could happen at any time and we don't know when. Well, how are you supposed to live? What does it say down here? Verse 6. So be on your guard, not asleep like the others. Stay alert and be clear headed. Does that sound like, well, I'm just going to get sucked out of here? I don't have to worry about anything. Be on your guard, not asleep like the others. Okay. So I want you to put yourself in a camp. You have believers, all right, who, again, verses 4 and 5, but you aren't in the dark about these things, dear brothers and sisters, and you won't be surprised when the day of the Lord comes. You won't be surprised. You're prepared for it. Okay. And then the other side who's not prepared at all. Which one sounds like they're leaning on imminence more? Okay. The one who's preparing for it or the one who doesn't know when it's going to happen? Okay. So if you're one of those pre-tribbers and you believe in imminence and that it could happen at any moment, which group do you belong with more? Okay. Because I would say it's not the one that's preparing and has an idea and is not blind to it. You're not in the dark about these things. You won't be surprised by it. If you're going to be surprised and in the dark, maybe you're in the wrong camp. That's all I'm saying to you. Okay. Now we see those signs, but those with discernment are having an idea it's happening. We can all sit here and, yeah, watch the news and politics and all this stuff. I get it. Okay. But let's move on. Okay. Luke 17, 29 and 30. But on that day, but on that day, the lot went down to Sodom. It rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. It will be just the same as the day of the Son of the Lord is revealed. Okay. I'm sorry. The Son of Man is revealed. Can't talk. So in Matthew 24, all right, this is the parallel gospel to Luke 17. At the end of Matthew 24 and into Matthew 25, it talks about different parables. Okay. I'm just pointing this out because I'm going to read a little bit in Matthew a little bit later. But these parables that lead up or that are in this portion, okay, in the what people use as the rapture, okay. You have the parable of the faithful and evil servant, you have the parable of the wise and foolish virgins, and then you have the parable of the talents, okay? Been talked about plenty of times, and that's going into Matthew 25 as well. While these parables speak on being ready, as Jesus could come back at any time, all those involved in these parables knew he was coming back. Okay, if you think back to these parables. Okay, in Matthew 24:45, a faithful, sensible servant is one whom the master can give the responsibility of managing his other household servants and feeding them. If the master returns and finds the servant has done a good job, there'll be a reward. I tell you the truth, the master will put that servant in charge of all he owns. But what if the servant is evil and thinks my master won't be back for a while, and he begins beating the other servants, partying and getting drunk? The master will return unannounced and unexpected, and he will cut the servant to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. Okay, so again, the contrast between knowing he could be back at any moment and not caring that he could be back at any moment, right? All right. You talk about the wise and the foolish virgins. Okay. That's in Matthew 25. All right. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, 5 were wise. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough olive oil for their lamps, but the other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. Okay. And again, prepared, not prepared. Okay. That's all I'm getting to. That's all I'm trying to explain through this. Okay. Again, Luke 17, 29, 30. But on the day that Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. It will be just the same on the day that the Son of Man is revealed. Okay. This wasn't an event that's going to sneak up on them unless they were consumed with the other things, eating, drinking, living life, being normal, ignoring the signs. Okay. This preaches to the imminence that you should be living your life in expectation, not that it could happen at any time. Again, can God do anything? Of course he can. He's God. All right. But again, 2 Thessalonians 2, there are things that he says in his word will happen prior to his return. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to a passage in Matthew right quick because I want to explain this. I'm going to get into how the rapture is what it is. Okay. There is a rapture. Yes. It's not a pre-tribulation rapture. We'll get into that in a second more. But I want to explain too that the possibility that this isn't the rapture you're thinking of. It's not actually a rapture of believers. Okay. And I can tie that into a lot of places, but we're going to go here first. So Matthew 13, and we're going to read verses 24 through 30. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone, his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed seeds among the wheat and left. And I know lots of y'all know this passage, but just bear with me. And when the wheat sprouted and produced grain, then the weeds also became evident. And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? And then how does it have weeds? And he said to them, An enemy's done this. The slave said to him, Do you want us then to go and gather them up? Okay. And he said, No, while you're gathering up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Okay. This is kind of a connotation for life in general. Why does God not wipe out all evil on earth right now? What does he say here in verse 29? No, while you're gathering up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. One, you're going to take some wheat with you. What if you're in a time in your life where you're wheat, you're a righteous person, but you're living like a weed? Okay. And the harvester comes and wipes out all the weeds, and you're a weed in that time in your life. Okay. What if a weed being taken early affects your walk as one of the wheat? You know what I'm saying? There's a reason why says this in 29. No, he doesn't want to take all the evil out of the world right now. That's not what he does, because if you take the evil out first, it'll affect the wheat. And again, who am I to, I'm not countering anything. I'm reading this. No, while you are gathering up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Okay. There's a reason God hasn't rooted out all evil in the world right now. All right. He's waiting. Verse 30, allow both to grow together until the harvest. Harvest is the end of the world. Okay. And this is explained a little bit later in Matthew 13. And at the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, First, gather up the weeds and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. And some translations say, Then gather the wheat into my barn. But here's the thing I want you to just remember as we go through this lesson. He says, First, gather up the weeds and bind them. So if I'm going to pick which ones to take first, one, God doesn't want it to happen before the harvest, before the end of the world. Okay. But at the end of the world, he wants the weeds, the unrighteous, gathered up first. Why is that? Well, we can do it now. Why? Because at the end of the world, when this happens, the righteous are righteous. Okay. In Matthew 24, it talks about how he's waiting until the right time, right? Until the end of time. And in Revelation, it talks about the saints that are like under the throne, complaining like, when God, when God. He said, all the Gentiles are fulfilled, when everyone is fulfilled, when everyone who is going to go to heaven is ready. Okay, that's this time. And he says, First, gather up the weeds. Now, again, the weeds, unrighteous, the wheat would be the righteous. He wants the weeds gathered up first. So if I'm the harvester and at the end of the world, I'm gathering one and the other, two in one field, one taken, the other left. Which one is taken? In this sense, first gather up the weeds. Okay, just keep that in mind. Back in Luke 17:31, on that day, the one who's on the housetop and whose goods are in the house must not go down to take them out, and likewise the one who is in the field must not turn back. Okay, I want you to think about this for what it means. So we're talking about on that day. All right, we're in this disaster time. This is in verse 29 and 30. But on the day that Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. So God is raining down fire and brimstone. He is destroying this place. Lot and his family are allowed to escape out. Okay. It'll be just the same on the day the Son of Man is revealed. So then we go to verse 31 on that day. So imagine Lot running out of the town with his family. One who's on a housetop and whose goods are in the house must not go down to take them out. And likewise, the one who's in the field must not turn back. You don't have time to do this, right? And if anyone who's seen any kind of dramatization of the Lot's story, they're getting out of town because they're about to get burnt up, right? But I want you to think about what this is saying for us too, because this isn't just a physical escape. This is also a spiritual escape. Okay. Escaping spiritual death, physical death. Okay. If you're on the roof, you don't waste time to go back. If you're in the field, don't turn back to what's happening. What did Lot do? Lot's wife turned back, right? We know what happened with her. Okay. But I want you to think about disaster that's coming. Noah's flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, these images that we have in this passage. Okay. Here's my question. If you're going to get raptured out of here before things get bad, why are we being told in Luke 17:31 to not go back to something to get something, or to look back at something like Lot's wife did? If we're getting raptured out of here, why are we being told not to do these things? We would be gone already, right? It says on that day, the one who's on the housetop and whose goods are in the house must not go down to take them out. And likewise, the one who's in the field must not turn back. Why are we being told these things if we're going to be raptured out, if we're going to be taken out and protected? Just think about it. Why are we worried about anything if we're going to get raptured out of here, right? Okay, it's in verse 32, it says, remember Lot's wife. Pretty short verse. I believe this is twofold here. Okay, I believe because the pre-tribulation rapture does not exist. All right, it's a post-tribulation rapture, meaning the tribulation will happen. Jesus will return at the end, as explained in Matthew 24. Okay, And I'm just going to read that verse for you right quick. Okay, in Matthew 24:16, then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down in the house to pack. A person out in the field must not return to get a coat. Again, this parallel passage from Luke 17. How terrible it'll be for pregnant women and nursing mothers, and pray that your flight's not on the Sabbath or in the winter. For there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless the time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive, but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. Right? Which means what? This tribulation time period, it will be shortened for who? The sake of God's chosen ones. If the tribulation is going to be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones, how is that the case if they're already raptured away 7 years ago? Because we can all agree, right? The tribulation is a 7-year time period as explained, right? If we're getting to the end of it and it's shortened, God shortens it for the sake of God's chosen ones. Is he doing that for the sake of the people that are already in heaven raptured away? Is he shortening it for them? Why would he shorten it for them? Who's he shortening it for down here? Why is he, if the church is gone and raptured away, who is he shortening it for but unbelievers? Okay? He's shortening it because there are people down here fighting for their lives, trying to survive, that are being faithful, God's chosen ones. Okay? Now, going back, we talk about this twofold types of destruction, physical, spiritual. All right. The physical aspect, obviously preserving yourself and your life physically. Okay. You're running for your life. Again, this is why I believe this is one of the most damnable heresies that we could have in Christianity is the rapture theology, the pre-trib rapture, that you're going to get out of here before it gets bad. Every dramatization of what the tribulation is, I can't imagine it being as bad as it's described in the Bible, right? And what did I just read? For there will be, in verse 21, Matthew 24:21, for there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless the time of calamity is short, not a single person will survive. This is not anything that people could have anticipated or actually put into a movie that makes sense. Okay. This is going to be worse than anything that's ever happened. Okay. This is us running for our lives. If you've been taught and you believe in a pre-trib rapture that you're going to get out of here early, that you're not going to have to deal with this stuff, that you're not going to have to persevere. One, it's going to be real easy for you to abandon the faith because you're not seeing what you thought was going to happen. Number one. Two, those of us who believe in it and are preparing for it, again, will we be able to hold out? No. The Bible is very clear about in Revelation about what's going to happen there, but you will be running for your life physically, right? Okay. And then spiritually, apostatizing. Okay. Don't turn back for the comfort. Okay. So again, I'm kind of fast forwarding to Revelation here. Why did Lot's wife, it says here, remember Lot's wife, verse 17:32. Why did Lot's wife look back? Two things, right? A physical thing, she was looking back for what she longed for, what she wanted back. Okay, think about the Israelites when they left Egypt. How we wish we could go back there where we had meat and all this good. They acted like it was so great. Okay, we know what Sodom was. It was a city that was so terrible that the Lord destroyed it because of all of its sins. All right, we sit here and act like nowadays all of our cities are just so bad and everything's bad, and God hadn't rained down fire on it yet. Okay, so just imagine you got to. Those of us who know that, we sit here and think about these cities and things that are going on in major cities and politics, things like that. God hasn't rained down fire and brimstone on these cities yet. So how bad was Sodom? Right? That's one. Lot's wife is looking back, one longing for what she used to have, thinking it was great. All right. Think about that from a Christian standpoint. All right. Again, like I just said with the Israelites, they wanted to go back to Egypt. They didn't want to go through this struggle. Okay. And that's why all this ties together, because the Bible explains struggle. There's not an individual in the Bible that's worth reading about that didn't go through something. Okay. Lot's wife took the easy way out. She didn't persevere through, just like Joshua and Caleb didn't take the easy way out, right? They're pushed through. We'll go and defeat them. The other 10 spies, they're scared. They're afraid. They're looking backwards. They don't want to go forwards where God commands them to go. God's telling us, don't look back. God's telling us, don't go back in your house right now. Okay. Lot's wife wanted to look back. One, maybe there's awe and wonder in seeing what's going on, right? But two, longing for what she had that she thought was so good when really it wasn't good at all. Okay. And then, like I said, a spiritual one, don't turn back for the comfort. I want you to, and this is going to connect to the next verse in just a second, but think of the mark of the beast, this time of this tribulation time. All right. We'll be running for our lives physically, trying to preserve our life. But there's a spiritual aspect to this too. Okay. And I'm going to read this here in Revelation 13:16. He required everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on the right hand or on the forehead. No one could buy or sell anything without the mark. That was either the name of the beast or the number representing his name. wisdom is needed here. Let the one with understanding solve the meaning of the number of the beast. Okay, 666. We know all that. But no, what's the kicker with this? No one could buy or sell anything without that mark. So I want you to think about this time period in the tribulation. We're running for our life. Physically, we're trying to keep our life. But what about spiritually? Because you could physically keep your life. In the tribulation time period, here's a passage that says how you can physically not be killed by the beast and all of his hordes of evil people hunting Christians down. How do you do it? Well, you just take the mark. Go ahead and take the mark. You can live normally. Lot's wife, think about this. Lot's wife looking back. I wish I could just buy some groceries. I wish I could get my food. I wish I could have a nice place to sleep. You can do all that if you turn back. All right. But again, those who put their hand to the plow, you're looking forward. You can't look backwards because your path will be wrong. Lot's wife turned back, and we know what happened to her. Okay. But just like with the tribulation time, you look back, you try to save your life. All right. You'll lose it. Right. Again, getting into the next one. All right, but let's just not just talk about earthly issues, material possessions, food, water, things like that. What about your family? What if just think of an instance where like you're running out of a burning house, okay, and you wanted to get an heirloom. Okay, your house is on fire. God says, don't turn back, don't go in the house, run away. But you need that family heirloom, okay? You need that important piece. Okay, that's a little idolatry, right? That's easy. We're not. Who would do that, right, Coach Shaw? Who would do that? What about in the time frame here, the tribulation time? What if God's saying, don't turn back, don't look back, and it's a child of yours? What if a child of yours wants to stay in Sodom and God told you to escape? Okay, do you think, and we can assume what we can assume about the Bible and what it says about Lot's daughter's fiancés and what evil men they probably were, but do you not think there was some kind of love for those individuals at some point? We know he has at least two daughters, right, from the stories of Lot. So two daughter fiancés. Do you not think there was some sort of love for that, for those people? So they're escaping doom. These people aren't coming with them. I want you to just think about that. Someone you love, you're in a burning house. God says, leave the house, but your child is still there, someone you love. The child said, no, I'm staying. I don't want to go. God commanded you to go. Is it possible it's not just something like with the mark of the beast where we're looking for food to eat that day? See, we simplify this so much when we read Revelation. Well, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. What if it's your child? What if it's your wife? What if it's your husband that is unwilling to go with you, even though you're telling them it's time to go? We witness to these people. We talk to them. We're trying to get them saved. But what if in the end times when it's time to go, God says it's time to go and it's time to get out of here, and you're ready to go, and you've told them it's time to go. We've got to get out of here, and they say, I don't want to. I'm like the days of Lot. I'm just eating, drinking, having fun over here. I don't see the disaster coming. It's time to go. Okay, that's easy in a spiritual sense to think that through. What about in the time when, if we actually saw hellfire and brimstone raining down, and we're escaping, and your spouse, your kids say, I don't want to go. Are you going to be willing to go when God commands it? Or are you going to be longing for them? Are you going to be looking for them? Okay, so I don't think this is just physical, material things. I don't think this is just a spiritual connection. I think it's something about material family also. Think about what you're going to have to give up to continue to obey God because the people in your life aren't willing to go with you. Okay? And we can talk about that right now, but what about when it's time in the tribulation and we're about to get killed and your spouse wants to take the mark so they can be comfortable? Are you going to take the mark with them? I mean, think about these things. This is what people need to be thinking of, being prepared for. Okay? Because it's easy oh, I'll never take the mark. Well, what if everyone in your family takes the mark? What if your parents tell you to take the mark? Your spouse, your kids. Well, let's all be together. Let's be a family. Are you going to take it still? Are you going to preserve your life? Okay. You'll preserve your life physically if you take the mark. Well, what about spiritually, right? So again, I think it's deeper than we just assume when we read a passage. Oh, well, yeah, I won't take the mark. That's easy. Well, think about what all that could mean. Lot's wife was running out of Sodom also, but stopped and looked back. She was being, and here's the thing I want you to think about. We always look at Lot's wife as this evil chick. We see her portrayed in the movies like she's not a godly wife. She's not submissive, all this stuff. But Lot's wife was told the truth about what was about to happen to Sodom, right? And here's the deal. Lot's wife was running out of Sodom and then stopped and looked back. But what if she kept running? She was going to be what? She was going to be saved. She was in the process of being saved. So it's not just the people in your life, Lot's daughter's fiancés, that are turning their back and think you're messing with them, kidding with them, whatever. What about the person that's halfway in and they're running out the door with you, but they just can't stop? They can't not look back. They can't help but long for what was. Okay, this has so many connotations in our life, spiritually, physically. historically, what we go through. We get in an uncomfortable state, and God's put us somewhere, and we're uncomfortable because it's new and out of our comfort zone, and we long for what we used to have. Even though it was worse than what you're going towards, it was comfortable and you knew what it was. Okay? That's what Lot's wife is doing. She was about to be saved if she just kept going, and she stopped because she wanted this. That was more important, that pull. And we all do it. I know you know what I'm talking about. We all have that pull to go backwards. We all have that pull to stop. We all have that pull to be comfort. But what is God calling you to do? And is it something that you need to keep striving towards and not look back? Again, okay, it's in Luke 9:62. This is a Coach for Christ staple, a Ronnie Shelby staple. Jesus told him, anyone who puts his hand to the plow and then looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. You can't be going that. This is what Lot's wife did. She had her hand to the plow going this way, but she looked backwards, and what happened to her? Okay, God used an extreme example, obviously, to turn her into salt, but this is what will happen to you, all right, if you're not prepared. Matthew 13:30. Again, I'm going to read what I read just a second ago. Let them both grow together till the harvest, and at that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them into bundles to be burned. Okay, now Luke 17:33. I've never, we've read this verse, and I know I'm kind of going long, but those of you, the three people who are still here are still here. Luke 17:33. I've read this verse a ton in my life. Never really put it together until I studied this out a little more with this particular lesson. Okay, it says Luke 17:33. Whoever seeks to keep his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will preserve it. Now you read that, and it's one of those passages you're like, well, yeah, okay, does that make sense? I don't know if it makes sense. You just kind of skim over it, like that sounds good. But let's really break it down. Let's think about it. Whoever seeks to keep his life will lose it. I want you to tie this with the connotation of the mark of the beast here. If you seek to keep your life physically, if I take the mark, right hand, right forehead, whatever, if I take the mark to keep my life, I will physically keep my life, but I will spiritually lose my life, right? And whoever loses his life physically will preserve it spiritually. Okay. I never put this together until I was reading it and I've been preparing this lesson for months, and I just decided to finally do it. Whoever seeks to keep his life, if you do everything you can to look back, to preserve what you want, to be comfortable, to take something like the mark, to be societally acceptable, you'll lose your life. Okay. But if you lose your life, Jesus says this all the time, whoever takes up his cross and follows me, right? Matthew 16:24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way. Take up your cross and follow me. You can't keep doing what you want. You can't keep looking back to what you used to have. All right. If you seek to keep your life, whether it's what was behind you, what you're comfortable with, or your physical life, if you seek to keep those, you will lose your life spiritually. Okay. But if you're willing to lose your life, if you're willing to take up your cross and follow him and move forward, put your hand to the plow and move forward, you'll preserve your life spiritually for eternity. Okay. Never thought about that verse that way until I read this out this different way. Okay, back to our original verse, Luke 17:34-36. I tell you, on that night there will be two in one bed, one will be taken and the other left. There'll be two women grinding at the same place, one taken, the other left. Two men will be in the field, one taken, the other left. Now, something interesting here for me. All right. This tells you that there are two people associated with each other that are of one faith and one's not, right? These are two. If one's taken, the other's left, we can establish that one person is a Christian, one is not, right? Don't know which one's taken yet, even though I've insinuated it to already. But how is it that these two people are now? Again, I got to preface this. This is not like going back in time 7 years. This is all continuing with on that day, Luke 17:31. On that day, the one who's on the housetops, don't go back, right? Don't, if you're in the field, don't turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to keep his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will preserve it. And then in verse 34, it tells you about the two in one bed, one taken, one left. Are we going backwards 7 years? So okay. The day of the Lord's the final day of the tribulation, right? This is judgment time. Are we going back 7 years, and now all of a sudden we are getting raptured out? Is that what this is, or is this happening on the day? Okay, that you have to twist that extra special to somehow rewind in time, even though it said on this day, just like in the days of Lot, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I laugh because people will try to twist this like, well, it's talking about the rapture, but then it's talking about the end times when Jesus returns, but then it's talking about the rapture again. No, no. Here's the deal. If it's talking about those things and you're pre-trib, you have to go like this to make it fit. If you're post-trib, like me, it all fits in one spot. It's that day. It's the same day. Okay. So you have to think of it that way. All right. But if we're going backwards, how are these people living? All right. Number one, we've established that the rapture is, you can believe what you believe. I think it's very clear that the rapture is taking place at the end when Jesus is returning. Okay, when things are getting bad. Now, I'm setting all this up, two taken, or two in one bed, two in the field, one taken, one left. Okay, but the key to this is the last verse of the passage. All right, when you read Luke 17:37, it says, "And answering, they said to him, 'Where, Lord?' And he said to them, 'Where the body is, there also the vultures will be gathered.'" Okay, so one's taken, one's left. That's a rapture, as people understand it in a sense. Okay, but the disciples ask him where. So, like, are they asking where? What? Where did this happen, or where are they taken to? And Jesus says, "Where the body is, there also the vultures will be gathered." Now, there's some translations that translate that from vultures to eagles, and then people people twist it like eagles are, you know, a bird soaring in the sky, and we will mount up on wings as eagles, and all that stuff. Okay, but the Greek word for vultures for eagles is that carrion bird. Okay, something that is eating something that is dead. Okay, the Greek word for vultures in this passage in verse 17 is aetos, Aetos. Okay, and it's in reference to where carrion is referred to. Okay, probably a vulture. Now, it could be an eagle. An eagle was a carrion bird, something that ate dead animals also. Okay, an attacking bird, a carnivorous bird. Okay, vultures, we know what they did. All right, they eat dead bodies. They circle around. That's why I got this in the background right here. I can't point where I'm supposed to be. That's why I have it in the background, because this is the key to the verse. Okay, where the body is, there also the vultures will be gathered. Now, I'm just going to ask you, if you're raptured out of here, you're a Christian and you're raptured out of here, and the disciples asked Jesus where they took you, and Jesus says where the vultures are. Tell me how that makes sense. Tell me how that makes sense. Doesn't make sense to me. Um, what makes sense to me is if, as in Matthew 13, talks about the weeds are the ones who are taken first. If the unrighteous are the ones raptured, where do they go? Where the body is, there also the vultures will be gathered. That makes a lot more sense. And I'm going to get to it in just a second of why I think that. And those of you who have read Revelation before maybe understand that too. But right quick, we're going to go to Luke 21. Okay, Luke 21, verse 20. "And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you will know that the time of its destruction has arrived. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills, those in Jerusalem must get out, and those in the country should not return to the city. For those will be the days of God's vengeance, and the prophetic words of the scriptures will be fulfilled. How terrible it will be for pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. There will be disaster in the land and great anger against this people. They will be killed by the sword or sent away as captives to all the nations of the world. And Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles until the period of the Gentiles comes to an end." Okay, this is all the same time period, the tribulation, the return of Christ, when all of Jerusalem when all of Jerusalem is basically under siege. Again, those who have read through Revelation and studied it out, you know where I'm going with this. Okay, verse 25, "And there will be strange signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and here on earth the nations will be in turmoil, perplexed by the roaring seas and strange tides. People will be terrified at what they see coming upon the earth, for the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then everyone will see the Son of Man coming on a cloud with power and great glory." Wait a minute. Everyone will see the Son of Man coming on the cloud with power and great glory. Well, that sure sounds like he's coming at the end of all this bad stuff. Okay? Go back and start in verse 20, and Matthew 24 reads it the same way. Again, you have to twist this the other way to believe that he came in a secret way 7 years before the end times are ending. Okay? Talks about all this stuff going on, how the world is being broken, people are frightened, all this stuff. And then verse 27, "Then everyone will see the Son of Man coming on a cloud with power and great glory." So when all these things begin to happen, stand and look up, for your salvation is near. Okay? This is not There's nowhere in the Bible where you can find some secret rapture that took place 7 years before his return. This is his return. And his return in Matthew 24 and in Luke 21 explains it at the end of all the tribulation. There's a reason it's in there that way. And again, you have to do some real gymnastics to get around that. Okay, tying this into Revelation, I mentioned Revelation a few times already. Okay, but in Revelation 19, verse 11, so Jesus is returning. So now I'm fast forwarding to Revelation. This is when Jesus is returning. Revelation 19:11, "Then I saw heaven opened, and a white horse was standing there. Its rider was named Faithful and True, for he judges fairly and wages a righteous war. His eyes were like a flames of fire, and on his head were many crowns. A name was written on him that no one understood except himself. He wore a robe dipped in blood, and his title was the Word of God. The armies of heaven, dressed in the finest of pure white linen, followed him on white horses." Is this a secret? No. This is the end times. This is when he's returning. "From his mouth came a sharp sword to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron rod. He will release the fierce wrath of God the Almighty like juice flowing from a winepress. On his robe at his thigh was written this title, King of Kings and Lord of Lords." Okay. Verse 17, then I saw an angel standing in the sun, shouting to the vultures flying high in the sky. Vultures. That's weird. Where did we hear that before? Oh, yeah, Luke 17:37. And answering them, they said, where, Lord? And he said to them, where the body is, there also the vultures will be gathered. So is this two in one field and one taking the other left? When is this taking place if Jesus is telling them where the bodies are or where the vultures are? What is the time period here while reading this? I'm going to read it again. Revelation 19:17. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, shouting to the vultures flying high in the sky. Is this really that hard to put together? No. Come, this is what the angel says to the vultures, talking to birds. Come, gather together for the great banquet God has prepared. Come and eat the flesh of kings, generals, and strong warriors, of horses and their riders, and of all humanity, both free and slave, small and great. And then I saw the beast and the kings of the world and their armies gathered together to fight against the one sitting on the horse and his army. And the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who did mighty miracles on behalf of the beast, miracles that deceived all who had accepted the mark of the beast and who worshipped his statue. Remember, those who turned back and wanted comfort. Those who seek to save their lives will lose it. Both the beast and his false prophet were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. Their entire army was killed by the sharp sword that came from the mouth of the one riding the white horse, and the vultures gorged themselves on the dead bodies. So where are these people taken? They're raptured out, taken to where the vultures are, because what is this called? You tell me, what's this called? And right before this, in Revelation 19, verse 6, then I heard again what sounded like a shadow of a vast crowd, of the roar of mighty ocean waves, of the crash of loud thunder. Praise the Lord, for the Lord our God, the Almighty reigns. Let us be glad and rejoice, and let us give honor to him, for the time has come for the wedding feast of the Lamb, and his bride has prepared herself. She has been given the finest of pure white linen to wear, and for the fine linen represents the good deeds of God's holy people. And the angel said to me in verse 9, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb. Okay, and again, then we move back to what I just read in verse 11. Jesus returns. I want you to put a couple things together here. The wedding feast of his return. Okay, what's the feast? Are we eating regular food? Is that what the wedding feast is? We're invited to this wedding feast, and then, well, are the people eating? No. Verse 17, and I saw an angel standing in the sun, shouting to the vultures flying high in the sky. Come gather together for the great banquet God has prepared. Come and eat the flesh of kings, generals, strong warriors, horses, their riders, all humanity, both free and slave, small and great. You are going to be, I've heard this before, I've heard it said this way, you will be at the wedding feast of the Lord when he returns. Okay? Are you going to be there celebrating his marriage to the church, or are you going to be eaten while you're at the feast? You're either going to be feasting or you're going to be food. Okay? Think about that. This ties together. There is no pre-tribulation rapture. This is the rapture. Okay. Well, what about when we're joined in the air with him? We are. It's called Parousia, and that's in Thessalonians also. And if you search up the word Parousia, Parousia is not we go up to be in the clouds with him and we're just stuck up there. Parousia is the advent of a king. Okay. I'm going to read that for you right quick. Just one little caveat. Okay. The big verse that people use for the rapture, besides the one about two in a field, one taken, which we've debunked, I'm assuming at this point. But First Thessalonians 4:16, for the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, with the voice of the archangel and with the trumpet of God. First the believers who have died will rise from their graves, then together with them, we who are still alive and remain on the earth will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and will be with the Lord forever. All right? People use this and this is a whole other sermon, First Thessalonians 4. All right, maybe I'll do it sometime. But being caught up in the clouds with Jesus, who's returning. And I want to point out here too in verse 16, the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout. So if you're going to use this verse as a pre-trib secret rapture that no one hears and it's a surprise, it says he comes down with a commanding shout with the voice of the archangel and with the trumpet of God. Now we all know, those who read the Bible, where the trumpets are located in Revelation and in what time period. But again, this is a whole other sermon. Okay. But it says those who are caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. That is the Parousia, his coming. All right. And I need to explain something to some of y'all who don't understand this. In biblical times, here, let me just ask you this question. If a king was coming to your house, are you sitting on your couch watching TV, waiting for him to knock on the door? I want you to, like, if the president of the United States, you can pick whatever royalty, a king, a president, whatever, if they were coming to your house and you know that they were coming to town, would you be sitting on your couch waiting for that person to knock on your door? I don't think I would. I'd probably be at least outside of my house looking on the sidewalk, like looking down the street, right? That's where this concept of his coming comes from. It's the Greek word parousia, which means the advent of a king. Now, those who have heard the word advent before, you know advent is the coming, all right? We use that in Christmas time, the coming of Christ. Christ did not advent for 2 seconds and then he went back away. Christ advent and then he was here and he grew up and lived here, okay? The advent of a king, when a king was going to enter town in biblical times, a procession of people went out to meet the king. And those who have read the Old Testament, you see this all the time with different tribes and the Israelites when they would go out and meet the person, and then they would escort them back to town. That's what the Greek word parousia means. Okay, go look it up yourself if you don't believe me. So when it's talking about being caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, when he returns, okay, again, you're either going to be food or you're going to be at the feast. You're going to be at the feast either way. Are you food or not? Okay. But it says in Matthew 13, and I've said this, first gather up the weeds, right? Bundle them up, throw them in fire. They're over there ready for the vultures. They're ready to be food. Then gather up the rest. And it says that in Matthew 24, gather up the elect from the four corners of the earth. When we are caught up, all right, to meet the Lord in the air, it is not to go up to heaven to stay away. Okay, again, we've already debunked this passage with the trumpet of God. This is not a secret thing where we're sneaking back off to heaven. Okay, we are up there to meet him in the air. It says to meet the Lord in the air, then we will be, and people read the rest, then we will be with the Lord forever. That doesn't mean you're gone in heaven right then. What's happening at this time frame? We go to meet him in the air to escort him to the feast, to escort him back to earth. Okay, it all lines up together. We are taken after the unrighteous are taken to the vulture area, right? Then we are called up with him. We escort him back to earth. Okay. I mean, this all lines up together. Scripture lines up together unless you put something else into it to twist it into what you want it to say. And that's all the pre-tribulation rapture is. It's something people want to be true. And I'll admit that would be really cool if it was true, because then that means I don't have to prepare. I'll be okay. I'll be ready to go. I will miss all this bad stuff. I won't have to be told things like in Luke 17, where Jesus is talking to him and saying, don't be like Lot's wife. He wasn't talking to the disciples. The disciples were all going to be dead by this time. He's talking to us. The Bible's for us. Okay. We can read it, understand it. There's an application for our lives. He's telling us, don't look back. Don't turn back to that. Don't take the mark. Da, 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 da. It's for us. He's telling us this for a reason. Okay. Lastly, Revelation 20, verse 5. Okay. And this is after the marriage supper. Okay. The 1,000 years, the millennium has started. And it says in Revelation 20 and 5, this is just why I'm explaining to kind of cap this up. This is the first resurrection. The rest of the dead did not come back to life until the 1,000 years had ended. Blessed and holy are those who share in the first resurrection. If the first resurrection happens at the end of the millennium, after the tribulation, after Jesus' return, after the 1,000 year reign, how in the world can we sit here and say we were raptured up in heaven, resurrected beforehand? Okay, and I'm going to go another word here. The marriage supper says it's at the end of the tribulation. In Revelation 19, we've already read that. I want you to think of what you're accusing Jesus of being. Okay, if the marriage supper happens at the end of the tribulation, and I've lined it out for you, who's part of the feast, who is the feast, all this happens in that final time. Okay, the final day. If Jesus is returning to earth for the marriage supper of the Lamb at the end of the tribulation, are you telling me that he's already raptured up his church, which is his bride? If you read the Bible, you know a church is the bride of Christ. Are you telling me that he already raptured up his church to live with him for 7 years prior to the marriage supper? Okay. Our marriages and weddings and engagement periods are different than they were in biblical times. But biblical times, do you think it was somehow more frivolous? Again, think of what you're accusing Jesus of doing here. Are you telling me that Jesus took his bride to live with him and his father in his house 7 years before he was married to her? Think of what you're accusing Jesus of being here. Okay. Jesus joins with his church at the end of the tribulation at the marriage supper when it happens. Okay. Again, think of what you're accusing Jesus of being if you believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. He's had his wife that's not his wife yet because the marriage hasn't happened yet. Live, and we talk about how wrong that is nowadays, and a lot of people live that way. But in biblical times, again, I go to prepare a place for you. They had an engagement period, and then he went off to build this extra section on his dad's house, and then the wife the bride to be is looking longingly for the groom to return. Biblical, that's why it's written that way in a biblical sense, looking longingly for him to return. And when he finally returns, now it's time to go and take her to be his wife. You're putting all that before the marriage if you're a pre-trib rapture person. Well, Jesus was honorable. He's probably just up there in heaven with the bride and she's in a different room. Hey, you twist it however you want, okay? I mean, you twist it however you want, which is what this is. This theology that's been around for 200 years, as I said at the beginning of this video. It is a faulty theology. It is a dangerous theology to believe in that. And I understand, if you're still here, maybe I've changed your mind. But there's a reason the Bible's written, and it ties in with everything. You can tie in Luke, Matthew, with Thessalonians, with Revelation, and get all this. And it's all the same story. Okay? Not hard to see it if you're willing to see it. But it's real hard to see it if it's not what you want to see. Just like the people in the days of Noah, in the days of Lot. Okay? I pray you got something out of this. I pray, this took me a few months to actually end up doing. All right? I had it prepared a long time ago, but it is what it is. I pray you got something out of it. I pray that you take what you need to take out of it. All right? God bless you guys. And we'll see y'all next time.